This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Charlie Kulas published Musical Pilot, an educational game, through Atari Program Exchange. Musical Pilot first appeared in the fall 1983 APX catalog, where it was awarded third prize in the Learning category. He later worked at McT, aka Microcomputer Technologies, a company that was contracted to program computer games by Sega. There he programmed the game UpN Down for the Atari 8-bit computers. This interview took place on April 20th, 2018.
My first computer, believe it or not, was made out of paper clips and a coffee can, and I won the junior high school science fair with it. And it's not quite as impressive as I'm making it out to be, because I just read a book that was called something like How to Build a Working Digital Computer. I think it was published in the 60s. And it showed you how to use a board and nails and paper clips and wire. And the paper clips, you could make switches out of them, with two paper clips, I think, that you could turn on and off. And that became a bit. Took the place of the vacuum tubes and transistors of the computers of that time. And the drum was a coffee can, which, was conductive. You could take off the paper label and you'd cover it with, I think it was first aid tape, that white tape that you find in these first aid kits. Mm-hmm. And then you cut out parts of the tape, and that became, when you rotate the drum to the next line, there would be cutouts and blockings of a contact onto the drum by the tape, if the tape was there or not. So that became a program. So then you could do things with this thing. The output would be these tiny incandescent lamps, and that would be your binary readout. So, it looked really impressive and cool. And when you turn the drum and flip the core memory paper and make lights blink in patterns and that sort of thing. So it was kind of impressive. But, I was always interested in machines and especially computers when they started to be talked about. I was reading Popular Electronics and Popular Mechanics. I think I had subscriptions to them, and piles of them in my closet. So I'd read about these other computers coming up, the IMSI 8080, I think it was, mm-hmm. The Altair. These were just one step up from my paperclip computer. I mean, they used front panel switches and lights, for input and output, and there was a real processor in there. You didn't have to turn a coffee can with your fingers. But and I don't know how much faster they were at typing in a program and seeing the results. But I couldn't afford it. I was just a kid, with a paper route, and so I had fun reading about these things. The next time I tried to get a computer, I was determined to build it myself from a Heathkit kit. But all I could afford was the keyboard. I thought, well, I'll start with this keyboard. So they shipped me this box, and it's got 35, 40 loose keys, and solder these keys onto. And I did all that, and that's as far as I could get, because the next part, the motherboard or some of the processing parts was beyond my finances at the time. But that even that keyboard was interesting to me, because it lit up these LEDs with the ASCII key code to do a pressing. I had this really cool mechanical mechanism to distribute the force across the whole length of that long spacebar key. Anyway, so from there, I think that took me into high school with computers the first 2 years, just because I didn't have one. But then sometime in, I think, late my sophomore year, I found a computer. It's down in, next to the HR office, and you can only use it before school starts, mm-hmm. or after school ends. And so I went there, and there's 2 or 3 guys and one teacher, I think taught accounting, in this room with these impact printers, hammering out information on paper and it was connected to some, I think it was HP 2000F or something like that, somewhere else. So we didn't really have a computer. We just had this room where you dial up to this shared computer for the school systems, and work on these paper printers. But that's where I started to program in BASIC, and I met some other people that were programmers, or they were learning how to code. So I started playing computer games. I mean, mind you, it's all on paper printouts, but there was a good Star Trek game called Trek 73, I think. And one of the guys there was writing a chess program. They actually played chess. It couldn't beat you, but it could at least make moves.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a backgammon program. I also wrote a program to I won't say steal, but to acquire passwords and logins, just as kind of a lark. I didn't really do anything malicious with it. It just seemed to me that, to log into this computer system, hello or a question mark, and then you would type in your name and your password. And so I just left a program running that whenever somebody hit a key, it would say hello. And then, they type in their name and password, and then it was easy because the modems would often fail, and you'd see a bunch of characters, gibberish characters,
mm-hmm.
out, and that meant, well, your modem disconnected. So my program did that, and then people would have to, start over and really log in. But I wasn't into. There was nothing to hack. I mean, people were just playing games and writing their little basic programs. So there was nothing, no credit cards to acquire at that time, or identities to steal. But anyway, that was my first kind of addiction to computers, because I had this machine, and let me, within the early morning and late afternoon hours, they let us use them and write whatever we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
After high school, I think there was I'm trying to remember if I got my TRS-80 before I started college or after. But at any event, somehow in my freshman year, I had access to an Apple PC for a little while, and then I got a TRS-80. I wrote a game on the TRS-80. It was called Brick Out, and it was a takeoff on the Breakout, the old Breakout arcade.
Mm-hmm.
That was written in assembly language. Very, very painful, saving the program to cassette tape, which sometimes wouldn't record or play back correctly. But also about that time, I found my college, the University of Illinois, had this amazing computer system called Plato, and I'm sure your listeners have heard about it from other people by now.
Sure.
And in fact, it's still available. But the U of I was kind of, I think, maybe one of the main, and maybe the originating campus for that whole program. So
mm-hmm.
It was pretty well deployed all around campus. And I gravitated to that thing like kid in a candy store. The problem is they only would let us play games on it from 10 p.m. till 5 a.m. So pretty much every night from 10 p.m. till 5 a.m. I was in that room with 30 or 40 other people, and I don't know what that did to our GPAs or the university's overall academic record, but somebody should have been looking at that. Whoever decided this was a good idea, I think that come down to that room and see what was going on. I did tear myself away from Plato for a semester just to see if I could still get good grades, and I did. But good 3-4 semesters, I was a gamer. And I did write some code. I did some 3D rendering of dungeon mazes, to make like a D&D type of a game. And we also had this weird thing called, I don't remember what it was called, but it was kind of like the predecessor to ASCII art, but it was ASCII art animation, because you could type in a character string, and not only did you have graphic symbols that some of these characters could be with special, Control or Command or Alt combinations, but you could also move the cursor around and overwrite what you had written. So I think the limit was 256 characters, but you can do these animations. And it was just a matter of, I think, typing the name of the string, and then it would play this visual. And I was really into making some of those. I did one of somebody pulling ornaments out of a box, putting them on a tree, and jumping up and saying "Merry Christmas." And I think there's a lot of the early gaming community was exposed to Plato and maybe started with it. I remember some of the names that I'd seen in the 1980s. They were familiar to me. I mean, that system. I remember playing with people in Hawaii, a lot in the Midwest. I think some in Texas, and we had chat. We had message boards and postings and things like that. It was, the first kind of community that I was exposed to, thinking that out. This personal computer thing is growing and it's going to be big. Anyway, towards the end of my college days, well, this is a little interesting sideline story. I mean, we're going to get to the Atari pretty soon. I hope you forgive me for this. You did say go way back. So
I did. Yeah. It's all right.
Okay, so I remember I was on a job interview, and I went on several of them. And most of these were in research in aerospace. My degree was in electrical engineering. They didn't have a computer science major then, but I took as many computer courses as I could. And I did know how to program at that point, coming out of graduating college. But I remember one job interview. It was general. I think it was Schenectady, New York. And it was a research group. And I'm sitting there, thinking, just in my three-piece suit. We were wearing vests back then. And, trying to be all serious with this guy. He looked older to me, but he's probably, mid-30s or something. Guy with beard, he's kind of very savvy, technical guy, very smart guy. And trying to be serious with him, talking about serious things. And I don't know why, but he asked me, well, what are your hobbies or what do you like to do? And I said, well, I like programming games. And then he gets interested, and then he starts talking to me about the game, and I told him about Bricker on the TRS-80, and he says, I want to show you something. He jumps up from his desk, and he takes me to their lab, which was down the hallway, and there's this computer sitting there. I think it was a terminal hooked up to a larger computer, but he says, type in anything. I typed in hello or something like that, and then it said, you are standing in front of the White House. And he said, type anything. And since we were talking about computer games, I figured, okay, this is some kind of a computer game. I typed something like, I throw a rock at the house. And then it says, you throw a rock at the house. And then I typed in, yell. And then it says, you yell. And then he said, well, try doing something with the house. And so I said, climb onto the roof. And then it says, well, you can type north, south, east, or west. And, I thought, well, this is a kind of a good idea for a computer game, but they need a lot more if-then statements, if they're going to make this thing work. And, but, it was, I guess, Infocom in Zurich. I can't remember the guy's name, but I guess that's where they developed it. Maybe GE is now going to go back and try to claim some of the profits. I probably shouldn't be saying this on a podcast, but, that was my, of course, I didn't know it at the time, but years later when I saw that Zork was going all over the place, and I remembered, oh, that's what that was. Mm-hmm. And I did play the game, and I played it all the way through, and it's an amazing, one of the first early kind of storybook games. Anyway, I didn't end up working with them. I took a job on the West Coast in Los Angeles with an aerospace company, and that's when I got my Atari 800. I think that was 81 or something like that. So starting then, I was working in aerospace by day and working on my Atari 800 by night. and I answered some ad in the paper, and they wanted a technical person, a programmer, to do some R&D work, and it was kind of this wacky way to tell how much alcohol has been poured out of a bottle in a bar. And we came up with these capacitive sensors, and we hooked them up to the Atari 800, and the port was getting data from these sensors. Mm-hmm. And I had written this program to show the bottles on the screen, when a bottle was picked up, then when it was put back down, and how much, subtracting the difference in weight and calculating how much vodka was poured out of the bottle. Anyway, this is all had to be assembly language.
Was this a product that they wanted to make?
Yeah, it was an invention, really. I mean, they were coming up with new technology. The sensors themselves were new. I mean, I don't know how many footnotes you want me to throw in here, but it was a very strange. Most of what happened with me in Los Angeles was extremely weird, kind of like some B movie that goes wrong. I mean, this guy that was running this whole thing, he had this house, a big house. And everybody that was associated with his project, he let them, stay in a room in the house for free as long as they were working on his project. So that ended up happening to me. I'm still at my day job, so I could leave if I wanted to. But some of these other people, they're like these captive, coders and hardware guys, and they have no, recourse but to stay there and, I guess, get their fast food meals a couple times a day and work on this project. Well, at some point, my day job has me flying out to some. This was a confidential project, by the way. There's a lot of stuff in aerospace is we have to do flight testing out at some site, away from there. So I kind of extracted myself from that project. But that's when, out in the desert with absolutely nothing to do after we get back from the airfield, I started working on Musical Pilot. I started seeing the Atari magazines where people were publishing all these games, and I thought, that seems like a good way to get started. And I wanted to do something easy and quick. I didn't have that much time. It'd be always the end of the day, long day. And I'd have to get up early, the next morning to get back out there. So I thought, well, I'll do a kids game, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, what do like 5-year-olds know about quality programming? I'll make something quick for that market. And there was, part of the APX catalog, a lot of it was educational, and a lot of it was for little kids. So I came up with this idea for Musical Pilot, which was this airplane flying in the blue sky against a background of musical staff, lines, and balloons would come up, and they were notes. They would correspond to their placement on the staff, so that when you hit the balloon with your plane, it would pop and make a note, which would be a note in the childhood song, Mary Had a Little Lamb or something like that. But you had to hit all the balloons to hear all the notes of the song, and you're moving your plane up and down. Well, I thought it was going to be a short program that I could write in BASIC, but no, I just couldn't handle it. It wasn't fast enough, so I had to write it all in assembly language, which of course takes about 8 to 10 times as long. I find myself dealing with making notes with countdown timers and trying to figure out how to get balloon popping sound, by mixing oscillator changes. I think I did what was at the time the biggest sprite ever written in a game for the Atari 800. Somebody said it was, like 4 inches square, which just means it was as blocky as you could possibly imagine. But again, I'm thinking, what a 5-year-old's not going to complain as long as it's bright colored and there's a smiling pilot on it. Anyway, I finally finished that.
Did you have a particular? Did you make this for a particular kid that you knew, or did you just decide the world needed?
That's kind of a funny question because when you send these games in, you're supposed to say what age group is it for, mm-hmm. And of course, I wanted to make mine as young as possible to get the most demographics that I could, but I hadn't ever dealt with a little kid my whole life. I mean, in my early 20s, And like the only 5-year-olds I'd ever dealt with was when I was 5 years old, and I couldn't remember what they were like. I couldn't even remember how old you had to be to hold a joystick, and how much strength you'd have to push the joystick up and down. I didn't know if that was 5 or 8 or 4 or whatever. So I just picked a number, and I picked a low number, and I said 3+. And that was, my market research was just sitting there trying to figure out what age to put down in that box.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so it gets accepted somehow, and I did win a prize. I think it was third place or something.
Third
like
place in the learning category in the fall 1983
there you go.
catalog.
Yeah. So they were supposed to ship me some dollar amount worth of equipment, which was fun. Which some of it I still have unopened. But at that point, I get a call from somebody at the APX group. It's a woman. She's very nice. She's saying nice things about Musical Pilot, and she says, I wanted to tell you there's a problem with Musical Pilot. And I was thinking, oh no, here it comes. Third graders can't operate it. They're going to blast me for it. This could be against some rule. I'm going to be disqualified.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that. I said, I'm sorry, but is it because, not third graders, but 3-year-olds can't play it? She goes, no, they actually can play it. It's that the pitches are off some of the notes. It's like, how can that be? I'm an engineer. I got all the frequencies, from a book as to what each note's supposed to be, and I use those calculations, and I to this day I don't know what the issue is, but that was like indicative of these ongoing problems that you would have trying to code up just games or programs on these machines at the time. I don't know if the clock rate was a little bit off, or the counter didn't behave exactly the way that the technical specs said it would, or there was an interrupt coming in and taking priority over the counter interrupt routine, and they're changing the frequency. It could have been any of these things, and those are the kind of things you'd have to try to debug. And if I had been told, if somebody had play tested it and told me that, I would have been sitting there trying to figure this thing out. But back then it was just one person doing the whole thing. I mean, I had to do the graphics, I had to do the sound, I had to do the code, the design, the paperwork for trying to offer it to the marketplace, and all of these things. And that's what the gaming industry was, for the good 2 or 3 years when it was starting out.
So I have a couple of questions about Musical Pilot before we go on. How well did it sell? Did you make any decent royalties off it?
I think I did get some royalties. It wasn't much, and I think that the program ended shortly after I made the submission.
Yes,
so,
it did.
Luckily I have an out. I can say, well, my game would have done well, but I just don't know. It was not for sale for long. I don't remember the exact time of it, but it was, it was enough of encouragement for me to want to do more. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I just did that in my spare time with what little time I had. It was my first attempt. And imagine what I could do if I just went into it with both feet.
Your program appeared in the fall 1983 APX catalog, and then the final APX catalog was winter 1983, and they shut it down very shortly after that. So, yeah, your program
that's okay. So I wouldn't have had much time to get much traction, but I mean, I was impressed with that program, and the catalog. It just had a lot of interesting ideas coming out. And the way that they handled it, the people that, I talked to, it was, everybody was into it. Everybody was very excited and motivated and optimistic. And, it was just a good feeling working on that and dealing with Atari.
Excellent. Do you remember what stuff they gave you or that you chose when you won the prize?
Oh, I remember it was hard to spend the amount of money they gave me. And that's why some of the stuff is still unopened. I could go back and look and tell you later, but it wasn't. I didn't need anything because I had already acquired everything I needed to do all the development I wanted to do. And really, there wasn't, aside from other product, games and utilities, there wasn't that much for me to buy. And by the way, when I was in this coding phase, I wasn't playing hardly at all. I was curious about other people's games, and I would try to see them just to see the quality of the graphics and the amount of animation and how they did the gameplay and whether they were the techniques they used. But I really had no time to be playing other people's games between coding on my own and playtesting my own and debugging. So I wasn't. I think a lot of what I bought was software that is still in the boxes there. But the amount of creativity that I could see that was going on was very impressive.
Cool. All right, so you did that, and what came next?
So my time in the at the site, at the flight testing ended. We go back to LA, and then I decided, I'm going to try to make it as a game programmer full time. I was a contract programmer working on other people's games while also trying to get my own games done. And one of the first jobs I had at that point was a company called McToy, kind of the McDonald's of toy makers.
Like MCTOY, McToy?
Yes, exactly, yes. And they started as a toy company, physical toys. I think there was a talking truck in there. A voice commanded truck. That they gravitated towards more electronic toys, and then they started doing these game conversions where, basically we had a group of programmers, maybe 5 or 6 guys, and we'd each be assigned to a machine. They'd wheel in an arcade game, like Tapper or Asteroids, or this post-Asteroids, but whatever games were around at the time. And we would have to convert it to, the computer we're assigned to. And they needed a PC person, and I had no experience with PC, but I said I did. Everybody there was basically just self-taught as to whatever machine you're programming, and a lot of them were self-taught coders on those machines, and they were good. Mm-hmm. They just kind of lived to read the stuff. So one guy there, I think it was maybe 15 years old, maybe younger. But so we'd play this arcade game, and then we'd just go off on our own and code this thing. And then, we were pretty much left to our own with a deadline. And the guys would be sleeping there and rolling in around 10 p.m. and staying all night, not showing up for a day or two, and trying to recover, and then coming back in. And it was all just random. I was doing UpN Down for the Atari 800, and each of my friends, and I got to know everybody pretty well. They were all on different programs. I remember one guy was working on a hardware accelerator for the Apple II, I think. It was called Speed Demon. It was like maybe the first accelerator that used onboard cache. Mm-hmm. And I'd be working late at night. He'd be in this other room, and I'd hear this loud swearing, and the board would go flying across the room and smash into the wall. I figured, he's having a harder time than me trying to debug the board. That was just a weird place to work, but it was a lot of fun, and it was really formative for me because we were all working on our own games too. That was the dream. We weren't getting paid very well at all for doing these conversions, but at least it was enough to still be honing our skills and learning.
So where was this McToy company located?
It's Los Angeles, kind of, I think the Santa Monica area. They changed their name from McToy, then became MCT, and then they decided, MCT could stand for Microcomputer Technologies or something like that. They were getting games from Sega, which I think was bought by Paramount, and I had been to that movie lot a couple times. And they would be paid by Sega to do a conversion, and then they would pay us. Of course, we would get a small fraction of the price that Sega was paying. But ultimately, these were all put out under the Sega title.
So it sounds like Sega contracted out to this company to make its computer games, its video games, and then market it under the Sega brand. Is that accurate?
Right.
Okay. So you said you did UpN Down. Did you do any others? I have a list of Sega's Atari titles, if that will help you.
No, I don't think I did any Atari titles there for Sega besides UpN Down. I did another title on the PC, and I didn't stay there that long. I mean, it was rough. It was hard. I was driving a broken down, '65 Mustang, which I loved the car, but it was really beat up. I mean, the tires were so bald. My roommate got me tires for one of my birthday presents. It was kind of I don't want to disparage the company because I liked all the people there, but we were at the very bottom of this totem pole of this hierarchy, and the money at the top was substantial. But then as you got way down to, where we were working, we were not by any means getting paid, a subsistence kind of a wage. But, I had some of the most fun times there also. And some of the, I said my experience in LA was kind of like this B movie. I mean, some of the things that happened is I was late with getting UpN Down, done. I mean, I had decided early on we used to use this technique called pathing or creating a path, for the player's sprite to go on. And UpN Down had a lot of roads, so the other guys were using these paths, which were well defined. You couldn't go wrong. You just have a digitally defined path, and you can keep the car on the path. But I decided, well, that's kind of boring. The road's black and it looks like a road, so I'm going to write some code that just looks for the road, and it's going to keep the car on the road. And when the car jumps, it's going to look for a road where the car's going to land, and if it's not within the bounds of the cars, it's going to land on the ground and it's going to crash. Of course, that was like very, very difficult to do in practice because of the way colors were being handled and shapes were moving around, and roads would fork off and merge back, and sometimes the enemy trucks were obscuring parts of the road. And anyway, I was late with my deadline, and I remember this guy has me again sitting across from his desk. He's telling me, you're costing, say, $50,000 a day every day that you're late. And I was thinking in my mind, well, man, can't you just pay me $500 so I can fix my car so I can get to work on time every day? Huh. And so at one point he looks at me and he says, you meet this deadline or you'll never work in this town again. And I had seen that 3 or 4, bad movies that I watched. I couldn't help but just burst out laughing. It made the guy even madder at me. But I did get the game done. We were just kind of having fun throughout all this hardship. And I remember there was one time I came in late. Well, I was always coming in late, like 11 o'clock at night. Come in the front door, the lights are all out, so I flip the light on, and I see all this commotion behind the receptionist desk. Okay, this is just a PG-13 story. So this guy's behind his desk, he's zipping up his pants, and I wasn't even going to stop. I saw the corner of my eyes doing something, so I just keep going, and then he calls out my name, and he says, "Oh, thank God it's you. I thought you were the boss." He says, "Come over here, look at this." I didn't really want to go over there, but I didn't want to be alone with this guy in the office late at night, and we're on bad terms. So I go over there. He's got like a 6-pack of empty beer bottles, and he's peeing into the bottles. He's telling me he's doing this test. He calls it the beer input-output test to see if as much beer comes out as goes in. So he's drunk these bottles of beer, and now he's trying to refill them. I'm like, okay, whatever. I got to debug this AI road tracking routine, so, please try not to make too much noise. I'll see you later. That was just like a normal...
Oh, that's weird.
Occurrence. Yeah, it's just...
He needed that other program that you're working on to figure out how much liquid was consumed.
He needed a lot of stuff. Yeah, right. I could have just weighed him before and then after, and we could have calculated how much, right? What came out, right?
Right.
There was another instance. This might be PG-15 if there is such a rating. where this guy, he was like the handyman. He wasn't a coder, but he would fix things and build things. He was like a carpenter. Again, to me, he seemed really old. He was maybe like late 30s or something like that. Blonde-haired guy, thin, very spiritual kind of guy. I don't know, and I liked him. I liked everybody that was there. And anyway, so he says to me one day, "Hey, Charlie, have you ever been up to the roof?" I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Up on the roof. It's a great place to suntan." And I said, "Really? How do you get up there?" And he goes, "Well, I set up a ladder out the back. I'm going to go up there. You should come up just to relax and de-stress." And so I thought, all right, it sounds like a good idea. I like the sun. I like suntanning. So I went out to the back after a couple hours more of coding. And, it turns out, those old painter's ladders are really long, made out of wood, and you could stretch them out to make them almost double size.
Sure.
But they've got this really rickety old mechanism from like the 1940s that holds the top part of the ladder to the bottom part. I mean, it's, like if you look at that thing, you'll think, this is really, why do people risk their lives on stuff like this? Anyway, so that's the ladder he had set up along this like 30 or 40 foot sheer brick back wall of the building, but it wasn't quite long enough to make it to the top. So he had taken a table, and on top of that, he put a wooden box. And on top of that, he's got this ladder extended all the way as far as it can go. And I can see that even if you stand on the very topmost of this ladder box table combination, you still have to kind of almost jump and grab onto the rim of the top of the wall with your hands and pull yourself up. And I'm thinking, I can't believe he's up there. And I was a pretty good climber, so I thought, well, I'm curious to see this guy meditating, on top of the mountain. It's like going to see this guru or something and find out the meaning of life. So I make the climb. I jump up on the wall. I climb up there. I see him. He's way at the other side of the building on the roof, laying down. I walk over there. The guy's spread out on a towel, totally naked. He's got like these quarters covering his eyes, and he seems to be asleep. And I'm just looking at him for like 30 seconds, just thinking, do I wake him up? Or do I go back on the ladder? And I was thinking, I'm not going to wake him up. This is just too bizarre. I just went back down the ladder, and I don't think I ever told him that I even went up there and saw his, meditative state. But I think coders at least where I was at that time, like I said, we're all kind of self-taught and flying by the seat of our pants kind of thing. The documentation was sketchy. I mean, a lot of times somebody would steer you to some information that would really, help you understand something, or they'd release a technical manual finally, after they've already shipped all their latest hardware, and then you could try to incorporate it into what you were doing. It was, felt like kind of like we're all in the same boat. It's kind of like the Wild West, and I was around these people that were doing the same thing I was interested in finally, because they were hard to find until I got into this group, and a lot of other people didn't really understand what we were doing. Computer games were still kind of fringe Hollywood stuff, because Hollywood was getting into it. I mean, the content, some of it was coming from movies, and the arcade industry, was encroaching into it or overlapping with it. So, LA felt like kind of the right place to be, that we were still like unknown entity. And I remember being at a party. One of my friends, he had this huge house in the Hollywood Hills, and he would throw these Hollywood parties. And I got to know him pretty well because he wanted to do some kind of a computer game with some of his ideas. But that's my extent of, being in touch with that scene. I was in a very different part of LA all day, just staring at the computer, trying to debug code. Mm-hmm. But I'm at his party and kind of off in the corner by myself. But I guess this girl had seen me being all chummy with the host, Mark. So she comes over and she starts talking to me, and we're having a conversation. And by that, I mean, she's smiling and talking to me, and I'm just acting complete awkward and, silent. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at her, and she's really attractive. And I remember reading about how they've done studies on attractiveness, and it has to do with the features of that attractive person are really an average of all of the features of people in the world, and that's what's appealing. So I'm looking at her face and thinking, is that shape of the eye, is that really an average of all of the other eyes of people in the world? Are her lips really like an average of different races of the world? And then I also remembered an article where they said everybody's face is asymmetrical, and if you actually had a symmetrical face, it would look very odd. And actually, the left half of your face is different from the right half of your face, and that's true for anybody. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at her face and looking at the left half of her face. Is that, different from the right half of her face? If I had a mirror, image right there, and, would it look weird if it was? And I think all she saw was like this weirdo staring at her face, looking from left to right and not saying anything. And, like some kind of, stalker or something. But yet she's still smiling and talking to me because I know Mark, who's the host of this flashy party. And at some point she says to me, "So what do you do?" And I just kind of mumble, I'm a game programmer. And she just kind of stops and looks at me for 2 seconds as if I was like a TV set and someone had just pulled the plug out. And she turns around and just walks straight away from me. And I was like kind of shocked and a little bit hurt. And I was like, my next game is going to be Buck Rogers' Planet Zoo. I said, you could have been in that game. I could have rendered you an 8-bit color. Just, very trying to be defiant in my own little programmatic way. But, I used to say that we were writing 8-bit code by 2-bit coders. Everybody had this kind of, fringe, misfit, kind of image, I guess, of where we were and what we were doing. And yet, in some ways, most ways, I think we felt kind of superior because we had these skills, which, ultimately, I think, channeled into the hacker mentality. I mean, it does. The more resources are put into computers and network, the more these skills became valuable in ways that you couldn't even predict at the time. But we had that sense of it, like these machines are going to be the most powerful things that humanity has seen so far, and we are kind of the masters of these machines. So even though nobody knows it yet, we're going to be like the masters of the universe. You guys are just blind.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was my Victoria experience. I ended up leaving, and from that point, I was working on some of my own Atari games, and I did go back to aerospace and get paid there as a consultant. And I ended up buying a really flashy car and driving it back to Victoria just to show everybody I wasn't driving around in a beautiful Mustang anymore. And that you can make a living being a coder. But some of the Atari games that I was working on didn't really get fielded. I mean, this was right at the time, right before there was an industry, I guess they called it a shakeout or something. And a lot of the distributors were going out of business, and a lot of the companies were being consolidated. So out of this shrinking came some large companies, like the Electronic Arts and LucasArts and companies like that. But I had games which I hope are in some of these old boxes that were in my storage space that, after you contacted me, I started looking for. They were very interesting to me because they were concepts. We would do a demo of an idea or maybe the attract screen of what the title was going to be. Sometimes there were playable prototypes of the first level or something like that. One of these was called Reefer Madness, as in Reefer Madness, that old movie from the 50s. I think that's kind of demonifies pot smoking.
Yeah.
But it was called Reefer Madness, and a guy that was my friend at Victoria, Tony, he came up with this I think all he had was the title. And he had this concept of you're a bug crawling around, on a plant trying to do something and get to the next level, like a Mario Mario calling level or something like that. And so I did a demo of it. I remember staying up all night for like 2 days in a row, trying to make it to the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, driving there with my friend with this 5.25-inch floppy in my hand. And the guy puts it in first day of the show, and it's running, and it looks fantastic. It's got this, high-res, multicolored flower. You climb up the stem of it. It's like 4 screens tall, so you're scrolling up. You hear this little caterpillar sprite that's moving around, and kind of the motions of the caterpillar, and these spiders are attacking you. And when you get to the top, there's this beautiful, flower blooming and color and shading. And he got like hundreds of orders for it from the show, but we just didn't finish it. Well, I did finish it, but it wasn't, the grandiose game it was supposed to be. It didn't get released. I don't know what happened. I think he just stopped taking titles, and maybe he folded at that point. But if I have that on a disc, I think that would be amazing to see. It was like these games that just didn't make it that were, I think, impressive.
Yeah, let's recover those things if we can. So, where was the intention to just sell these directly at shows and things, or to start a publishing company? Or
he actually had a company. Mm-hmm. He had a company with titles. He was established. Still kind of a solo guy, but there was a lot of distributors like that. I can't think of the name. My goal was to get some games of my own out so I can get closer to the top of the money flow, and be taking royalties and getting the benefit of some of the success. And this was pretty close to it. I mean, I was going to get some percentage for coding and designing it. And and by the way, at that time I was doing all the art. I was still doing the animation. We were seeing artists coming in, dedicated artists to do parts of the games. And some of the games I worked on, they did have artists working on them. But it was just the early parts of the transition. So it was still kind of solo people creating the game or making the game, mm-hmm. sometimes designing it too. But, this is still Los Angeles, and there are other companies I worked for that were just trying to make a fast buck. I remember there was a company, and again, I don't know the name. I don't think I would mention the name, because I'm about to say something not too flattering about them, but they were on Sunset, and they were a record label, kind of a lesser known record label, putting out maybe Vanity Records and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But they decided they were going to get in the game business. So the way they did it was they published a catalog of, there could have been 800 or 1,000 titles of games, but these would be 1 or 2 line titles. Mm-hmm. And, descriptions of a title and a title name. It would say something like, tweet, play the game with the joyous sounds that a bird makes, period. And that's it. That's the game description. And so when they would get enough orders by mail, then they would hire a programmer to make the game. I think you get paid $200. I'm not kidding. They would pay $200 for the coder to make the whole game, including the graphics and everything. Well, I didn't know that their other coders were using something called, Game Maker Kit or something like that, which was, you could get it on the Atari. It was on different platforms, and it was basically you just move blocks. It had all the mechanics for you of moving blocks around. You just had to put a bitmap onto the block, and say what happens when you hit this thing, or this triggers that. It was very high level, a way to skin an engine to make it look like Tweet or any other game. So I was taking those games and coding them in assembly language, and I could actually get a game done in maybe 25 hours or so. But $200 for 25 hours, it's not a good rate. Yeah. But if you could do it in 2 hours with Game Maker Kit, that was okay, and that's what kept these guys going. I did a title called Goldmine Terror,
Goldmine Terror, and I think the description was, "Mine your fortune, but beware the dangers below." Period. And so I made this game, and it has a miner digging down in this brown, dirt and find gold, and you get points, and water would come up from below, and you'd have to, try to avoid the water, or you'd die, and things would cave in, and you'd have to dig out. And it was a pretty good game for a 25-hour assembly language game. I don't know where that went or what happened to it. I'd love to see that again. Had something that looked like Tempest. To get out something that looked like Worms, and people ended up making games that looked a lot like that. But those were, to me, those were. I mean, that would be interesting because everybody knows about the games that got out, right? It's the games that were behind the scenes that could have been, and some of them were just pure. The creator's idea. They weren't constrained by. It's going to look just like this arcade game, or you have to make it look like this other successful title. And it was, a pure idea. Trying to remember what happened after that. I think that might be the end of my Atari efforts. Like I said, mm-hmm. the game industry, especially small time distributors, they were contracting and disappearing.
Yeah. Wow. So. All right. So you said you might have some discs around that we might have some games that haven't been seen the light of day. That's exciting.
I hope so. I mean, to me, that would be exciting. I did find 2 versions of the source code for UpN Down, but they do have penciled. One has a lot of penciled markups, so I don't think that was the final version. The other one is just a couple. It could be final version or close to it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I may have put some kind of an Easter egg in UpN Down. I can't remember. I think I was telling you about a different game that I did put an Easter egg in. That wasn't an Atari game. But, that should be easy to find if you're looking at the disassembled code, just to see where key presses are being read in and compared to some pre-existing data. I think it might have had a God mode in it, where you just kind of run around destroying everything.
Well, this morning I played UpN Down, and I played Musical Pilot, and my daughter, who's 11, saw me playing Musical Pilot, and she's just like, "What is this?" And I said, "It's some sort of educational game," and she's just like, "Give it to me." So I handed it over, and she played it for like 15 minutes until she had to go to school, and she seemed to be enjoying herself, and I was just like, so she couldn't get off level 2, and frankly, well, neither could I, but she played it more than I did, and she was just like, "I can't get past the balloons on level 2," and I'm just like, so what are you learning? This is an educational game. She's just like, I don't know, I'm learning to crash into balloons with my plane. It's like, okay. Anyway, she had a good time with it.
I should have put down 11 plus in that form on the entrance sheet. Yeah, no, I mean, you're probably the only one that has played both those games in one day. There should be some kind of a trophy or accomplishment that you could put on your Facebook page.
Right.
Well, I'm glad you're keeping all this stuff alive. You and the healthy community that I, looked at online the last couple of days.
Well, they're
refreshing.
It's a lot of fun to do. So if you could send a message to the Atari computer community, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
I would say, keep on pushing those joysticks and pressing those buttons. I mean, there's something about being able to go back into the past and find things interesting and relevant. I can't really put my finger on it, but it seems to have something to do with who we are as a race, as a species, as the Earth population. And I'm glad to see that we do it not just in movies and fashion, but you guys are doing it for computer games too. It's actually a big part of society.
Good answer. So what do you do today?
Well, I went to law school. I decided that I wanted to try to protect my ideas, and I hated paying lawyers, so I thought I'll just become a lawyer and follow my own paths on my own ideas. So I've been doing that. Some of them have to do with games, graphics, ways to do the advanced graphics that they're using today for movies and even the games today look like movies. That's what I've been doing. I've dabbled back into coding for some of the projects I've worked on. I do some, when I come up with an idea, sometimes I take it to the level of productizing it or prototyping it. So, I'm having fun. I don't consider myself a coder anymore. I kind of wanted to get away from staring at a computer screen, working the debugger for so much time every day, but instead I now have a job where I'm staring at the screen working on a word processor for endless hours a day. So, but I do get to work with people more. I find that's what was missing a little bit from being a hardcore game programmer.
Mm-hmm.
But I still love games. I still play games. I mean, I was playing World of Warcraft back when it was a thing. I've been playing Clash of Clans. My kids are, at an age where they like games, although, they don't play from 10 p.m. till 5 a.m. They get to play for an hour or two on weekends. But Minecraft, is an amazing game. Shadow of the Colossus got remastered. Been playing that again. And if any of my old stuff in the boxes that I discovered boots up, I'll probably start playing some of those again, just because your show has inspired me.
Awesome, that's good to hear. All right, so have we covered all of your Atari stories? Is there anything we skipped that we shouldn't have?
No, I really like that company. I mean, I kind of followed it almost as in awe of like LucasArts and Atari were my favorite heroes, I guess, or aspirations.
Yeah. So,
yeah, it's fun. It's fun remembering it and talking about it and kind of reliving it and remembering how I felt. And I guess I still feel.
Good.
It's another thing about looking at the past, right?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Super enjoyed talking to you, Charlie.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are two ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/Savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.